So it's interesting. I could see the crowd when I was over here, but I stand on the stage, and now I can't see any of you. Hello in the back row. Hello. All right, so my name is Bryan Liles, and I'm here to talk about Application Ops 1.0. You can tell that I'm in the tech industry because I invent terms and give them versions with no meaning. But I want to talk about this new thing that I have today, and because it's almost lunchtime, and if I wasn't talking right now, I'd actually be going to lunch. I put the conclusions first, so you can actually decide whether do I want to go eat and stand in the rain, or do I want to listen to this guy talk? So let's talk about my conclusions. So, as I said before, having a great continuous integration story is pretty amazing. We see all the lessons of why we should be able to deploy with confidence. And we see what happens whenever you control your logs and what happens to you when you don't control your logs. And we also understand what it feels like when your application is talking to you. We've been able to actually assess those feelings. And then we also learn the benefits of being able to experiment and constantly improve. So my name is Bryan Liles. I call myself an urban software developer. The quick story is I'm an American, and for some reason they call black music in America urban music, even though I don't live in a city. So I figure that I'm black, and I write software for a living, so I'm an urban American software developer. It works. And you know what? I invented it, so if you ever say it, say that Bryan Liles guy. And I do work for DigitalOcean. We are a cloud for developers. How many of you have actually heard of DigitalOcean? Oh, this room is so full of awesome. You know what? Me, my family, and all my coworkers, thank you for your support. It's been very, very nice. So moving on. So how many of you actually write apps for a living? I say I write apps for a living. So are you this person? I write the app, and some other, coworker, fool, somebody else has to actually deploy it. How many of you actually do that? Just throw the app right over the wall. Unfortunately, there's a lot of developers that do this, and we're in 2015, and we're going into 2016. We do not have to do this anymore. So do you ops? As a person who writes an app, you should understand the operation of your apps. I hear developers all the time to say, I write in Go, or I write in Rust these days, or I write in this. I don't actually know how my app works. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. We should not be doing that. So what I did is I'm trying to create this buzz around not saying DevOps, because DevOps is one of those weird terms that I don't understand. I've read books. I actually had dinner with the guy who created the term, and I didn't even know who he was. We were just talking, and I said, this DevOps thing is kind of silly. And he's like, yeah, I do that. And I said, oh, you do it? He's like, oh, yeah, I made it up. And I said, oh, as I ate my cereal. And I was like, oh, this is pretty horrible, but I think we can do better. So I said, I'm going to one-up you with app ops, because apps are better than just dev. So what is that? This right here there's this program for the Mac called Sketch, and it cost $100, and I had it for a few months, and then I realized I didn't use it. But the reason I didn't use it is because I actually cannot use drawing programs. So I drew this, and it took me about a good hour or so, but I'm really proud of it, so I wanted to include it in my slides. So what we have here are my 5 steps. I'm going to give you just a very simple plan. It's continuous integration. It's continuous deployment. It's logging. It's metrics, and it's error handling. If you can actually get a hold of these 5 things, your deployments will be better, and your ops people will love you, and your people on the ops side, your apps people will love you. So let's talk about this a little bit. Continuous integration. We all know what it is, but we need to ask ourselves a series of questions whenever we are actually deciding to do CI. Because I'm going to tell you right now, CI is more than just using Jenkins to say, I ran that software. And that's really where we end a lot of times, saying that, hey, is it past CI? And that's actually not a very good way of talking about CI. So what is CI? So CI is this, and this is distilled. These are technical terms. Garbage and stuff are actually words that I use every day. And CI is the magic in the middle. So what does this actually look like? So we have garbage going in, but actually that's your commit. And generally, most of us here are using Git or something like that. So whenever I say a SHA-1, I'm just talking about an identifier for a commit. I'm sure there are people in this room who are using Subversion. I will say that there are lots of people out there who are hiring for people who use modern SCMs, so please go find them. We should not be using Subversion anymore. So your commit goes in, and then what happens? Well, we have some kind of test build, and then what happens? We create an artifact, and that's actually the point that I want to bring up. The outcome of your CI is not red-green. The outcome of your CI should be some kind of artifact. So let's think about that. What's an artifact? You saw that. I didn't even know that slide said that. So before we go back, let me go back real quick. What's an artifact? An artifact is actually something that's tangible. And of course, it's computers, it's all bits, it's ones and zeros, so it's not really tangible. But really what it is that whenever you have a passing build, you should be talking about a SHA-1 if you're using Git. Or you know what? Why don't you tag your successful builds? Tags are actually kind of free, and if they get too old, you can delete them. But tags are free. But you should be talking about, we should be talking about that we have certified this software through our continuous integration process as working. So we're going to talk about this tag rather than we're just going to deploy from master. And I know there's a lot of strategies of people deploying from master, and that's cool and all, but think about it if we can talk about what that thing is in production. So remember this term artifact. So now that we have something to deploy, let's deploy it. So what does your deployment strategy look like? And these are questions that you can think about. I'm not going to go over all of them, but you know, I tell people when they're starting a new project, and let's say you're starting a new Rails app, because Rails is still pretty popular in the world, the first thing you should do with your Rails app, before it really has any kind of business logic in it, is figure out how you're going to deploy it. Because if you can deploy an empty app as you create new functionality, and you actually get down to the end times where you have to do your deploy, it's nice to have that deployment process figured out up front. So if you're just doing cap production deploy, or you're using Fabric, or you know you're going new terms and you're actually using something like Docker, you should figure out how to do this at the beginning. And when you figure out this, when there's less moving pieces, it's very easy, or it's much easier than when you have many moving pieces. And of course, I include the Docker whale in there in my slides. And the only reason I do this is because Docker is literally the only company in the entire world who has better logo than we do. So I just want to give my props to all my Docker friends out there and say, you know, you guys got one thing really great. So when you do, that was not a slight. I'm a huge fan of Docker. You guys are, it's actually, you know what the funny thing is? And I only say you guys in just the male way. I'm saying you folks are actually the horrible people for thinking that I meant something negative by that. So when you take your Docker, we want to move Docker out to our servers, and there's lots of great options these days. Docker, I will say, because I was talking great about Docker just released their 1.9 and 1.0 of a couple of different things, and they actually make it pretty simple to move things to production these days. And there's also things like Google Kubernetes. I'm a huge fan. There's Mesos from Mesosphere, or is it Mesosphere from Mesos? I don't know. But either way, I'm just kidding. It's pretty nice combined with Marathon, Aurora, and Kronos. And then there's other old school ways that you can do it. But that's not what I want to talk about here. What I really want to talk about is immutable infrastructure. Show of hands, immutable infrastructure, fans. Right here in the front row. You want to come up here and sit next to me and just help me out? All right, so let's talk about immutable infrastructure. I want to introduce this new term to you if you've never heard it. It's really, really simple. It's immutable infrastructure. We deploy things, and we never touch those things we deploy. We get rid of them when we deploy them. This term was coined by Chad Fowler. Chad Fowler was a great Rubyist. He wrote some really good books about moving to India. He's from the States, but he's now in Berlin working at a company called Wunderkinder, who got picked up from Microsoft, so he is now literally the man. So what do your deploys look like? Do they look like this? You have some kind of artifact, right? And you want to move it out to server 1, 2, and 3. Because if you're going to have one server, you probably should have two. And if you're going to have two servers, you should probably have three. And the reason why is because you're going to move into some kind of distributed something or another, because this is where we're going. And you cannot, two people can't have an election, three people can. So just remember that. If you're going to have one, you might as well have two. And if you're going to have two, you might as well have three. And because we work in the cloud and actually resources are really cheap and you can have them by the hour, you might as well have a whole bunch of them. So we actually had deploy 1, and we moved things out to the server. And then deploy 2, we move it off to the server. Is that good? I mean, it works for us. It works for probably almost all of us. But no, that's actually a horrible thing because when we do our deploy too, we actually don't know the state of our actual installs. And we want our deploys to be deterministic every single time. We don't want any type of randomness in our deploys. So think about that. Once again, more things. But the most important thing on the bottom of this slide are your servers pets or are they cattle? And Bryan, what are you thinking? Pets or cattle? This is supposed to be somewhat of a tech talk. And we're going to talk about animals. Yes, we are. So on the left, we have very cute dog licking a cat. Little do you know, this dog ate the cat right after the picture. But, for right now, it actually works. And on the right, we have some cows. I wouldn't eat these cows. These are the worst looking cows I've ever seen. But this will help me illustrate my point. So one thing we have is pets. And what are pets? Pets are given things like, oh, you know what? I like comic books. So I'm going to name this server Wolverine. And then I'm going to name this other one Cyclops. And I'm going to name this other one Spider-Man because he doesn't really fit in this universe, but I still like the name. That was a joke. All right. But really what it is what pets are servers that we put up that we have to take special care of. And when they break, we have to nurse them back to health. Everybody has some pets right now, and generally they're called your database server, whether you're using Postgres, MySQL, or something else, or Mongo, especially if you're using Mongo, those are definitely pets. But that's not a bad thing. Cattle are different. Cattle don't really have names, and in this situation, I actually did say app001.dc2.example.com, but I'm going to go one step further. Even inside of DigitalOcean right now, I'm trying to get to the point where, why are we even naming servers at all? If I can actually say what this server is and put it behind the load balancer, why does it even need a name? Because guess what? When it breaks, I'm just going to get rid of it. Like I said, when it gets ill, we get another one. And just remember that all my servers that are alike, they are all identical. There's no chance. And we use automation, right? So what does it look like when you're using cattle instead of pets? So whenever we deploy artifact 1, we deploy it to server 1, 2, and 3, and just say that those aren't really names. It's just because humans need names to identify things, but they're not really named. So now we actually deploy artifact 2 to server 4, 5, and 6. And then we just take our load balancer and we point it over. What does that help us do? So let me tell you what that helps you do. Well, what it does is it allows you to deploy, verify, not on your current application stack, that things are working. And then whenever you decide that it works, you just swap it over. So here's things, my employer says I have to say things. Yes. But think about that whenever you're doing your actual deploys. Wouldn't you be a lot more comfortable in your deploys and do them a lot more often if you could actually be ensured that you're not really touching production? And if your deploy doesn't work, you just get rid of it and you start over again. And I'm not saying that everyone should use my cloud, but I'm saying you should use a cloud-like thing so you can actually have this kind of flexible infrastructure. So now, let's think about this. What's my app doing? Well, do you really know what your app is doing? So if your app crashes in the middle of the night, will anyone hear it before your customers start calling you? So everyone here has logs, right? I mean, come on, everyone here has logs? Of course, everyone here has logs. But if your process looks anything like what I'm getting ready to show you for actually searching through your logs, maybe we're doing it wrong. So, first of all, I have Zeus server here, so I have this pet here, and I'm going to SSH in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my app directory because I actually use apps, and this is like a Rails app to me. And then guess what I'm going to do? Well, I have this problem, and I'm looking for foo, so I'm just going to tail F it. And the thing is, this actually scales even pretty high because I can open up more than one terminal, and I can do this all at one time. So, right? Right? Doesn't matter. But, we can do better than that. So first of all, where are your logs? If your logs probably might sit on your server, but maybe they shouldn't, because guess what? Servers go away. They go crazy. So look at even my slides. This is how I'm trying to demo this. Like, server 2 said, whoa, what's going on? And server 3 says, hey, it's pretty crazy. But the problem is that if you keep logs on your server, they're going to get shaken and stirred. And we're not James Bond, so we don't want our logs shaken or stirred. So really what we want to do is we want to take our logs, And notice that I actually went ahead with my trend of just naming servers whatever. So now all my servers are named server 2, but it doesn't matter because server names aren't important. So what we have here now is we're going to have a log server. In a DigitalOcean, what we actually end up using is Elastic, and we are mostly fans of the Elastic stack. So we have Elasticsearch. All of our logs kind of get pumped in there, and then we use Kibana and other things to look at them. But it's nice because Elasticsearch actually creates this great-looking set of charts and graphs and a whole bunch of things. I had to blur all these things out. Our lawyers said I couldn't show you this, but really what it is just how many bottles of something we consumed last week. So one thing that I will complain about here, and I like to do this whenever I have a big audience, just complain about something. Let's talk about Logstash from Elastic. Hopefully they're not here in the audience, and I'm not talking about anyone personally. Logstash is cool, but you cannot convince me that my high capacity, highly tuned application running on many tens of thousands of nodes is going to have his logs consumed by a JRuby app. Just not going to work. We do care about memory, so what we've done is we've actually replaced Logstash in our stack with our syslog. Our syslog is one of the most amazing pieces of software ever. It really can do everything if you understand its templates. Got a little ahead of myself there, but that's cool. So what kind of things should I log? Well, answer these 3 questions, I believe. If I were to trace, if I were to want to trace through my application, what would I want to see? And that's really what your logs should look like. And what do I do whenever the poop emoticon hits the fan? Think about that. What information do I need if this process goes away right now? And then also, does my code capture errors? But we should think about that later. Actually, that's higher up on my app ladder. So now, let's think about something else. What's going on? So Bryan, you just talked about logging, and now you're talking about what's going on. What's going on here, Bryan? So let me tell you. Logs, log files, shipped off to log servers are one thing. That's what your application is saying about itself, or your operating system or whatever. Metrics are a little bit different. Metrics are looking in most time, and maybe we're probing, or maybe we have things on the outside of our app sending out. But metrics are really more of a state of what things are. Metrics are not logs. They're so different. So really, I like to liken it to an app has a pulse. And if your app is crashing and no one is paying attention, doesn't make a sound. We got to think about these kinds of things. And once again, this is not a section on logging. So the crazy thing here is that this is a 45-minute talk, and I thought it was 35 minutes until yesterday morning when someone said you had 25 minutes. So I said, I'm going to do it in 20, and it's going to be even more amazing. So let's think about this. So now we have logs, and we have other stuff for our peace of mind. So we talked about logs, so let's talk about other stuff. The other stuff are 2 different things. And what they are exceptions, because we are capturing our exceptions, and their telemetry. So let's talk about exceptions first. You need to capture your errors, and we happen to use an app called Sentry to do this. But one piece of advice about Sentry, if you're getting 1 million Sentry exceptions a day, maybe you should go fix that. You should not use your error handling, your exception handling system as your general catcher, because the word is called exception. And I don't speak a lot of languages, but I know in English, exception means exceptional. So if it happens all the time, it's not exceptional. So like I said, so here's another thing. So telemetry, this is actually just a little bit of hints of what we use. We're big fans of Prometheus, and the little anecdote that I have here is that, believe it or not, every good idea that we've had in tech for the past 10 years or maybe 15 years has come out of Google. And you're going to say, no, Bryan, you're wrong. And I'm going to say, take back the history of all these products. Google did it first. It's basically like The Simpsons did it. Like that South Park episode, Simpsons did it, and it really was Google did it. Think about it. Hadoop, Google did it. Advertising, well, I don't know if Google did that. But a good example would be like Prometheus. Prometheus is actually an encapsulation of how Google does logging. And I trust them because they have more servers than a lot of people. So what they do is we actually do a lot more polling, and we have these custom exporters than just sending logs out. I'm only putting Prometheus out there because they're a great group of people out of Berlin, and I just want to give them all the press that I can. And also, it makes pretty colors. Everyone loves pretty colors, right? Unless you're colorblind, and then you like pretty shapes. So we're all inclusive here. So, all this. So really what it is we're taking all this good information and we're putting it into a central repo. Some people use OpenTSDB, some people use Graphite. We're using Prometheus right now. We're trying to grow out of that. There's not an answer. 2016 is the year for that. And so what else can I do? And this is almost the end, and this is my favorite part, 12-factor apps. I'm not saying that you should, I'm saying you should read 12-factor app. I think you should go search for this on the Heroku website or on Google and just figure out what it is. And then I'm just gonna say, you don't have to follow it, but understand how actually doing things like providing environment variables as your arguments instead of having command line flags, and making sure that all your apps are stateless, what that actually does for you. These are very important things. And what you're gonna find is ultimately they're all good ideas that your other engineer who hates 12-factor really likes anyways, so you might as well just use it. Use chat ops. I'm not advocating Slack, even though we do use Slack, but one thing that we do is we have bots for everything. We can deploy everything at DigitalOcean through a bot. I can just talk to it and say, hey bot, deploy our home page, and it will do that. Hey bot, deploy our backend, and it will do that. Hey bot, what's going on right now? Who's on call? It will do that. If you do this, this will allow you to have a more distributed stack, and then you can have a more distributed stack, you can have more distributed staff. And if you have more distributed staff, you can actually find good people who don't live where you are. And for people who don't live where all the action is, because I don't live in Silicon Valley and I refuse to because it's expensive, this is very good. We actually pull all this into our chat ops where everyone can see it. What else can I do? So I did start off talking about DevOps is kind of weird, but I will end on, DevOps doesn't present a very important thing. I'm up here today and I do all these talks because I have empathy for all the developers and all the people in operations who are doing these things. I really understand what you're going through. And I want to do everything that I can to make it easier or just at least a little bit more amazing. Because, come on, we have the most awesome job ever. We're not sports stars, we're not in the movies, and we don't make that kind of money. But what kind of job can you go to every day where you just do the same thing you do at home? Think about that. So what else can you do? And it would not be here. I will tell you one else things you can do. Whether you do this or not is up to you. But you can also go boot a droplet on DigitalOcean. And the reason why I say this is because it's not because I'm advocating my company. I'm basically saying this space is so nice, and whether you use us or you use someone else, you should use us. But you should understand why the cloud is so important, and then how your problems change when you can boot servers and then get rid of them in the next hour and only owe $5. Or actually, it's 0.007 cents, but you know what I'm saying. So more animations, and I just want to end on one last thing, only because I have this great audience that goes back to Asia back there. So I do this because I love developers. I also do this because I don't see enough people who look like me, and I'm not from Europe, so I don't know how the problems are there. But I do know the United States that we have problems, and people are trying to address these problems, but they're not doing a good job. What I'm saying is that when people see someone like me doing this, talking about things like this, so I go from these types of talks to heavy apps talks to heavy code talks to whatever, I'm just trying to be that good role model. So I want you to leave here, think about how you can be that good role model for, you don't have to be for black guys, but I would like for you to do that. But be the role model for whoever you think you need to be the role model for. And let's take all this good mojo and these good vibes that we received at this conference this week and move them forward. And hopefully I will see you next year in Portugal. So thank you. All right.